My name is Marcy C. Fisher, and I was 33 years old when my fiancé whispered the truth behind a rose bush and expected me to bleed quietly. At our engagement party, Simon leaned close and said, "I'm having second thoughts about everything." So I canceled the wedding and told everyone why. Years later, he saw me at the park with my husband and daughter, and by then, the life he doubted had become a life he could only watch from the outside. The fairy lights strung through the old oak tree looked like captured fireflies. Laughter floated across the backyard in warm waves, mixing with the smell of grilled meat, expensive perfume, and summer grass. Our families stood in little circles with wine glasses and paper plates, congratulating each other like they had all personally survived the 5-year road that brought Simon and me here. I stood near the makeshift bar with a whiskey in my hand, watching him across the lawn. Simon looked beautiful in the navy suit I had helped him choose. He was by the fireplace, laughing with his friends, head tilted back, his smile bright enough to make me forget every argument we had buried to reach that night. He had always been magnetic. Loud when he was happy, dramatic when he was wounded, impossible to ignore even when silence would have been kinder. For years, I had called that passion. Later, I would understand it had often been performance. But that night, I was still all in. I remembered the proposal like a scene from someone else's movie. Miller's Point, rain pouring so hard the trail turned slick beneath our boots. Simon breathless and laughing while I fumbled with the ring box, my fingers numb from cold and nerves. When he said yes, it was almost a shout, echoing off the wet granite cliffs. I thought love like that had to survive. I thought anything so cinematic must also be true. My best friend Diane bumped my shoulder and grinned. "Can you believe you're actually locking it down?" "The best kind of terrifying," I said. She laughed, but then her eyes flicked past me. "He's looking at you." Simon had stepped away from the fireplace. His smile was gone. He caught my eye and tilted his head toward the darker side of the garden, near the old rose bushes. My heart jumped stupidly. I thought he wanted a secret moment, a kiss away from all the noise. I crossed the lawn, dodging cousins and congratulations, following him behind the oak where the party became a distant glow. The roses smelled thick and sweet, almost suffocating. "Hey," I said softly, reaching for his hand. "You okay? Everyone's having a great time. You're the star tonight." He pulled his hand away and tucked it under his arm. That tiny movement changed the air. "Simon?" He stared at a half-bloomed rose instead of me. "Marcy, I'm having second thoughts." The words hit like a hand to the chest. For a second, my mind scrambled to make them smaller. Cold feet, party nerves, too many people, too much pressure. "About the party?" I forced a laugh, but it came out thin. "We can sneak away if you need a break." He finally looked at me, and the coldness in his eyes stole the breath from my lungs. "Not the party. Everything. Us. This." He gestured toward the lights, the music, the future we had invited people to celebrate. I blinked. "We planned this together." "I know," he said, voice low but steady. "That's the problem. It all feels so final. I don't know if I want final. I don't know if you're it." That was when I saw them. Cole and Mason, his two closest friends, standing near the hydrangeas pretending not to watch. But they were watching, carefully, quietly. Like this was not a confession. Like this was a scene. A strange clarity moved through me. Simon was not sharing fear. He was staging doubt. He wanted witnesses. He wanted me to cry, beg, ask what I could change, give him proof that he was the trapped one and I was the desperate woman holding the cage shut. The hurt rose hot and violent in my chest.
The urge to plead came next. Then somehow, both passed.
I nodded slowly. Okay. His face flickered. That was not the line he expected. I understand, I said. Then I turned and walked back toward the party. The noise rushed over me when I stepped into the light. Diane saw my face and stood straighter. My parents smiled uncertainly. Simon's mother looked toward the garden. I walked to the center of the yard, picked up a spoon, and tapped it gently against my glass. The conversations died, one by one. Everyone, I said, my voice carrying clearly. Thank you for coming tonight to celebrate with us. It seems the celebration was premature. The engagement is off. Simon is having second thoughts about everything. So please enjoy the food and drinks, but the party is over. The silence was absolute, and inside that silence, I took my first clean breath of the night. The silence in my apartment that night felt heavier than furniture. It was not peaceful silence. It was the kind that presses against your ribs and reminds you that the future you were arranging piece by piece has been erased in one sentence. I drove home from the party without looking back. I did not answer Simon's calls. I did not answer Diane's either, though I knew hers came from love. Streetlights blurred past my windshield, and all I could hear was his voice near the roses. I don't know if you're it. 5 years together, one engagement party, both families gathered under fairy lights, and suddenly I was reduced to a question he wanted witnesses for? When I stepped inside, I took off the champagne-colored blouse I had bought for the party and dropped it on the floor. It felt like a costume from a play that had closed mid-scene. The apartment looked exactly the same, which somehow made everything worse. The wedding magazines on the coffee table, the venue brochure pinned to the fridge, the little ceramic dish where Simon used to toss his keys when he stayed over. My phone kept buzzing. Mom, Diane, Simon, his mother. A number I did not recognize. I turned on Do Not Disturb and allowed only my parents and Diane through. I was not hiding. I was building a wall around the part of me that still wanted to understand. At 6 the next morning, I woke up because sleep had nowhere else to take me. The reality hit before my feet touched the floor. Not a nightmare. Not a misunderstanding. The roses, the whisper, the glass in my hand, the shocked silence after my announcement. All real. I made coffee because ordinary rituals are sometimes the only rope left. Then I opened my laptop and stared at the spreadsheet I had named Wedding Plan Final. Final. The word almost made me laugh. The first call was to Ridgewood Gardens, our venue. Brenda answered with her usual bright voice. Ridgewood Events, this is Brenda. Hi, Brenda. It's Marcy Fisher. We have the wedding booked for October 15th. Oh, Marcy, good morning. What can I do for you? I need to cancel the booking. A pause. I'm sorry? The engagement has been broken. I understand we'll forfeit the deposit. Please cancel everything. Her voice softened. I'm so sorry. Are you sure? Yes. Thank you for your time. I hung up before her sympathy could reach me. Then I called Magnolia Catering, the string quartet, the photographer, the florist, the bakery. My script became clean and mechanical. The engagement has been broken. Cancel the booking. I understand the deposit is forfeited. Thank you. With each call, I dismantled a future I had once protected like something sacred. It hurt, but underneath the hurt was control. Simon had tried to make me stand in uncertainty while he decided whether I was enough. I refused to keep paying deposits on his doubt. 2 days later, the doorbell rang. I knew before I opened it. Simon stood there in a gray sweater, tired but not sorry. His arms were crossed and his jaw was tight, like he had come to defend himself from the consequences of his own words. You didn't have to humiliate me, he said, brushing past me into the apartment before I invited him in. You canceled everything? Seriously? We could have talked. I closed the door and stayed beside it. You told me at our engagement party that you were having second thoughts about everything. In front of your friends. What was there to discuss? He threw his hands up. You're so black and white. It was a feeling, Marcy. A moment. You turned it into a public execution. I stared at him. No. You chose the setting. You chose the timing. You chose your audience. I only translated it for everyone else. His face flushed. I was scared. I needed reassurance. No, I said quietly. You needed a stage. That landed. I saw it in the way his mouth opened, then closed. For 1 second, the performance cracked, and there was panic underneath it. Not regret. Panic that I was not behaving the way he expected. You always do this, he said. You make everything final. You don't know how to handle messy emotions. Messy emotions are human, I said. Public cruelty is a choice. His eyes narrowed. So that's it? 5 years and you're just done? You ended it behind the rose bushes. I only stopped pretending it was still alive. He looked around the apartment, maybe searching for the woman who would have begged him to stay, promised to be easier, softer, less certain. She was not there anymore. You're a coward, he whispered. You ran because it got hard. I picked up my coffee mug from the counter and held it with both hands so he would not see them shake. You should leave. For a moment, I thought he might say something real. Instead, he turned and slammed the door hard enough to rattle the frame. The silence returned after he left, but it felt different now. Not empty. Decided. The world did not end after Simon slammed my door. That was the first surprise. I had expected the universe to acknowledge the collapse somehow, for the sky to bruise, for time to slow, for strangers to look at me and somehow know I was walking around with a future missing from my chest. Instead, Tuesday came. The sun rose bright and careless. My alarm went off, my coffee brewed. I went to work because grief, apparently, does not excuse project deadlines. The office was worse than the apartment at first. People knew. Engagements do not explode quietly when half the guest list works in overlapping circles. Conversations died when I entered the break room. Someone from accounting gave me a soft, pitying smile and asked if I was holding up. I became fluent in deflection. I'm okay. Appreciate it. One day at a time. Really, I'm fine. I said it so often that eventually, parts of it became true. I buried myself in a data migration project that had been sitting on the back burner for months. It was complex, clean, and beautifully indifferent. Code did not whisper doubts behind rose bushes. Systems did not need reassurance with an audience watching. Problems appeared, I solved them, and the result worked or it did not. There was mercy in that kind of logic. Weeks bled into months. The first stage was numbness, then came sadness. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just a low hum under ordinary things. I would reach for my phone to send Simon a photo of something stupid, then remember he was not my person anymore. I would pass a bakery and think about the cake tasting we never got to do. But the ache became less like a wound and more like weather, present, then passing. Diane refused to let me disappear. She showed up with pizza, bad movies, and the kind of loyalty that does not ask for speeches. You don't have to be inspiring, she told me one night when I apologized for being quiet. You just have to be alive on the couch. That made me laugh for the first time in weeks. I went back to the gym, not to transform myself for revenge, but because lifting something heavy and putting it down felt honest. I reconnected with friends Simon had always dismissed as too safe, too boring, too conventional. Funny how the people he considered dull were the ones who showed up without turning my pain into entertainment. The updates about Simon came slowly through Diane, who hated being my unofficial news source but understood I preferred truth over rumors with teeth. The first one arrived 3 months after the party. We were at her apartment watching a game when she cleared her throat. I heard something from Mike. I kept my eyes on the screen. About Simon? Yeah, he's seeing someone, a woman named Leona. Apparently she's a singer in that local band he used to talk about. Of course, Leona, the free-spirited, unpredictable musician who probably smelled like clove cigarettes and never used a calendar. Everything Simon had accused me of not being. Good for him, I said. Diane studied me. That's it? What else should there be? She hesitated. It lasted 6 weeks. She ghosted him after a gig in Portland. I felt nothing sharp. No victory, no jealousy. Just a quiet confirmation that the thing Simon called freedom might have only been instability with better lighting. Sounds about right, I said. Pass the chips. More updates followed over the months. His friend group splintered. Cole and Mason, the witnesses by the hydrangeas, apparently found out that being audience members to cruelty did not make them look clever. Some people admitted the engagement party scene had been awful. Others avoided Simon because nobody wanted to be trapped in his version of events, where he was the complicated soul and I was the cold woman who refused to understand him. Almost a year later, my mother called after running into Simon's mother at the grocery store. She mentioned Simon, Mom said carefully. He didn't get the promotion he wanted. She said he's been distracted. I waited for pain. It did not come. Are you okay hearing that? Mom asked. I'm fine, I said. It doesn't have anything to do with me anymore. And that was the truth. Simon's life had become a weather report from a country I no longer planned to visit. Rain on the coast, winds from the north, possible storms. None of it required me to pack an umbrella. The chapter with him was closing. Not because he apologized, not because I understood everything, but because I stopped needing the ending to come from him. The woman he left behind under those fairy lights was gone. In her place stood someone quieter, steadier, and finally uninterested in being chosen by a man who needed an audience to doubt her. The first attempt came after 6 months of silence, and that was what made it feel almost insulting. By then, I had stopped flinching every time my phone buzzed. I had built routines that did not include checking whether Simon had posted something dramatic, or whether one of his friends had decided to send me a moral lecture. I was at the gym, wiping sweat from my forehead after a set of deadlifts, when my phone lit up with a number I did not recognize. Hey, it's Simon. I know I probably shouldn't text you, but I was thinking about you. Hope you're doing okay. No apology, no mention of the rose bushes, no acknowledgement that he had turned our engagement party into a stage for his doubts. Just a casual little doorway, cracked open like we had run into each other at a coffee shop instead of detonated 5 years in front of everyone we loved. I felt a flicker of something, not longing, not anger, more like disgust wrapped in disbelief. I deleted the message and went back to my workout. The second attempt came a year to the day after the party. I was at my desk, deep inside a work session, when a voicemail appeared. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. I pressed play and leaned back in my chair. Simon's voice came through thick with tears, stripped of its usual theatrical smoothness. Marcy, it's me. I made the biggest mistake of my life. Leona was nothing. She was a distraction. What we had was real. I was scared and stupid, and I know I hurt you. Please, can we talk? Just 5 minutes, please. I listened once, then again. Not because it moved me, but because there was something almost clinical about hearing regret after the damage had finished blooming. He sounded broken, yes, but broken was not the same as changed. A part of me wanted to feel pity, but all I could remember was his face in the garden when he realized I would not beg. That flicker of surprise had told me more than any voicemail ever could. I saved the message, not as a memory, but as a receipt. Proof that the man who called me cold had eventually found out what cold really felt like when no one came back to warm him. The third attempt arrived through Cole, of course it did. Cole, who had stood near the hydrangeas, watching Simon humiliate me like it was some private theater. He called on a Saturday afternoon while I was folding laundry. I almost let it ring, but some morbid part of me wanted to hear how they were framing it now. "Marcy," he said, "no hello, no softness. You need to stop being so stubborn." I sat on the edge of the bed. "Nice to hear from you too, Cole." "He's a mess, a complete mess. He knows he screwed up. Are you really that heartless? You loved him once." "I did," I said. Past tense. "That's cruel." "No," I replied. Cruel was letting him pull me behind a tree at our engagement party so he could question whether I was worth marrying while you and Mason watched. Cole went quiet for half a breath, then recovered with anger. He was confused. People get scared before marriage. Then people talk privately. They do not stage emotional executions in front of witnesses. He's suffering. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and even I heard how little warmth lived inside the words. "But Simon's emotional state is not my responsibility. It has not been for over a year. Please do not call me about him again." Cole muttered something ugly before I hung up. I did not block him. I simply placed the phone face down and kept folding laundry. That was how far I had come. Their outrage used to feel like a summons. Now it felt like background noise from a house I no longer lived in. The final attempt came a few nights later, not tearful, not polished. The real Simon finally returned in a rapid string of texts. "Fine, be that way." Then, "You were never emotionally available anyway." Then, "You were a robot then, and you're a robot now." Then, "You're probably still alone in that sterile apartment, pretending you're happy." Finally, "I'm better off without you. I was right to leave." I read them in order, each one peeling away the apology voice from the voicemail. This was the man beneath it. Not sorry for what he did. Angry that remorse had not gotten him access. Angry that I had not returned to the role of patient woman, emotional translator, soft landing. This time, I did not delete the messages. I took a screenshot and saved it in the same folder as the voicemail. Not to punish him, to remind myself if nostalgia ever tried to lie. Then I placed my phone on the nightstand, turned off the lamp, and lay in the quiet. No anger, no grief, not even pity, just peace. The door was not only closed now, it was bricked over. The park on Saturday morning became our sanctuary long before I realized I needed one. It was the same little stretch of green where I used to walk alone after Simon, back when my life felt like a house with all the windows blown out. Years later, it belonged to something entirely different. Sunlight fell through the old oak trees in soft gold patches. Children shrieked near the slides. Strollers rolled over gravel. Somewhere nearby, a father was losing an argument with a juice box. I stood behind the baby swing, pushing my daughter Ellie in a gentle rhythm while she kicked her tiny sneakers and laughed like the whole world existed just to surprise her. "Higher, Mama," she demanded, curls bouncing beneath her yellow sun hat. "A little higher, adventure girl," I said, giving the swing one careful push. Julian sat on a nearby bench with a book open in his lap, though he had not turned a page in 10 minutes. My husband had this way of watching us, that made me feel held without being managed. He was not dramatic. He did not sweep into rooms like a storm. He was steady, warm, and quietly funny in ways that made ordinary life feel like a gift I had not known how to ask for. When I looked at him, he winked, and something in my chest softened. This was not the frantic passion Simon used to call proof of love. This was deeper. A current, not a firework. Real in the way breakfast dishes and sleepy kisses and tiny socks in the laundry are real. I lifted Ellie from the swing, and she immediately wrapped her arms around my neck, burying her face into my shoulder. She smelled like sunscreen, baby shampoo, and summer. I kissed her curls and turned toward Julian, ready to ask if he wanted coffee, when I felt it. That strange, cold prickle of being watched. I looked up. Simon stood on the gravel path about 20 yards away, holding a takeaway coffee cup. For one suspended second, the park noise thinned around him. He looked smaller than memory. Still recognizable, still handsome in a tired way, but diminished. His shoulders curved inward. There were faint lines around his eyes, the kind life draws when someone spends too long resenting consequences. He was alone, and he was staring at Ellie in my arms, at the wedding band on my hand, at the husband rising from the bench beside me. The past folded in on itself. Fairy lights, roses, his cold whisper, the glass in my hand, the announcement, the slammed door, the voicemails, the venomous texts. For a heartbeat, it all passed through me like weather through an open field, and then it was gone. Simon took a hesitant step forward, then another. "Marcy," he said. His voice was thinner than I remembered, less certain. "Simon," I replied, polite as if greeting someone I once knew through work. His eyes moved to Ellie. "She's beautiful." "Thank you." Ellie peeked at him shyly from my shoulder, then tucked her face back into my neck. I swayed her gently, not because I was nervous, but because she liked the motion. "I heard you got married," he said. "Congratulations." "Thank you," I said again. There was nothing else to give him. Julian reached us then, slipping one arm around my waist with effortless familiarity. Not possessive, not performative, just natural. "Everything okay?" he asked me, his eyes on my face, not on Simon. "Perfect," I said. Simon flinched at that word. Maybe because he understood I meant it. Maybe because he had once thought my life would remain frozen around the damage he caused. Maybe because seeing me whole hurt more than any anger could have. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something else. An apology, maybe. A question. A memory dressed up as a key. But whatever it was, he seemed to understand there was nowhere left for it to go. I adjusted Ellie on my hip and looked at him one final time. "Take care of yourself, Simon." It was not a blessing. It was not a punishment. It was a final closing of a door that had already been locked for years. Julian squeezed my waist, and together we walked down the path toward the car. Ellie started babbling about ducks. Julian laughed and promised we would look for them next time. Behind us, I knew Simon was still standing there, a solitary figure in a bright, living world that no longer made room for his shadow. I did not look back. I did not hate him. I did not pity him. The chapter with his name on it had closed so long ago that even the echo had faded. He was a ghost, a relic, a lesson learned beside a rose bush. I buckled Ellie into her car seat and made a silly face until she giggled. Julian slid into the driver's seat and reached for my hand. "Still perfect?" he asked softly. I looked at my daughter, then at my husband, then at the sunlit road ahead. "Better," I said.